I can see we've got, there we go, meetings being recorded. You should have got a little pop-up. You can ask questions later if you'd like anonymously, just pop them in the chat. And hang on, let's just see where we've got folks tuning in from. We'll have a quick look at the chat. We've got Sarab from Delhi. We've got folks from Brisbane on our team last year, actually. Fuang lockdown in Melbourne. More from Melbourne. This is awesome. Looks like we've got folks from everywhere. I love this. All right, so today I'm really excited to be interviewing and having a chat with Jenny. It's going to be pretty informal. We'll go through a series of things from her journey in starting, as well as why bubble tea. I know, Jenny, you've done a lot with virtual in terms of crowdfunding. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I think you told me you had the highest number of people registered for the expression of interest stage ever for the platform, which is phenomenal. And we also want to talk about how you're an optometrist, really, and that's what you were doing prior to starting a bubble tea empire. And I also want to chat a little bit about puzzles, and we'll get to that. I thought that you mentioned that to me on our call earlier, and I thought that was really fascinating. So I want to start with, how did the bubble tea club journey start? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we started, well, firstly, hi, everyone. I'm actually so surprised that like quite a few of you are here. I was actually telling Priscilla just before this, I was like, if 3 people actually watching this, I'm like, you guys, I was like, wow, that's more than I expected. For a bubble tea club, like we started during the pandemic. So at that point of time, like I was just stood down from my job, as a lot of people were, and I think we were closed for about 8 weeks. So after 2 months, we were just left in the shadows. We didn't hear anything from our bosses. And so I started a couple of different businesses. Like I couldn't just sit idle, and I just was someone who was willing to learn and do something, because to me during the pandemic, I guess it was so much unknown and so much precarious opportunities out there that we just decided that maybe I was never going to be an optometrist again. And so my friend Pam, she actually messaged me and say, like, imagine if we actually started like a DIY bubble tea kit, where you can actually make it in the comfort of your home. Because instead of making it for like $6 to $7, getting it from like a shop, which is like $6 to $7 from the shops, we can make it a lot more convenient for people at home. But this was actually just like an idea at the time. We didn't really take it too seriously, to be honest, but we just gave it a shot. And then on the first day of launching, we had Tim, who was only 15 years old at that time. He actually built the website, and we launched within 4 days of inception. Justin, my partner, and I actually came up with the recipe. We tried it, and we're like, this is actually so good, and it tastes just like the shops, and it's a very familial thing that we were grown up with. So we decided to launch after 4 days, and it went viral on the first day. And since then, it's just never stopped. We haven't really looked back.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Now, just before you started, tell me, I'm going to jump to this, because I remember before you did the bubble tea thing, tell us a little bit about this puzzle story.
Yeah, so just before we started like bubble tea, like I said, like we couldn't sit idle. Actually, it was inspired by Dan Andrews, because Dan Andrews said on TV, he was like, these people are not essential. You guys are not essential, but puzzles are essential for your own sanity, I suppose. So he said puzzles were actually going off. It was going back in trend. And I'm sure you would have seen like friends and family were just buying puzzles for the kids. And so we launched something called the Puzzle Challenge at that time. And we also created a Facebook community around that, bought a couple of puzzles in, and made memes around Dan Andrews at that time. And that's when, until like Pam actually approached me, we were just like, we ran from A to B and tried something new. And since the puzzle challenge didn't take off too much, and the bubble tea club did, we just kind of scrapped that idea and then just went on with the next.
That's so fascinating because it reminds me of the story. I don't know if anyone tuning in has heard the Airbnb co-founders. Originally, they had their idea for Airbnb, but they were really short of cash. So they played on a political kind of, at the time, I think there was an election. And so they made this cereal. I don't know if you know this story of Obama O's, and I forgot the other political leader at the time, but they made this cereal and that's how they got all their cash. And that's how their first investor actually got really interested in them, because it was pitching Airbnb and they thought, oh, look, there's no way people are going to go sleep on blow up mattresses in strangers' homes. We're just not going to do it, right? Investors were thinking. But then he heard these people say like how they created cereals to get more cash for their actual startup. And that was like, I remember the investor, I read the interview saying, now that's interesting because it shows that you're like really resourceful, really creative, and really attuned to how you can use certain marketing playing on what's happening currently. So I think that's really clever of you. And I think that's a fantastic story. So I guess my next question is, when did it go from being like a side hustle idea to a fully fledged business? Because I have a lot of entrepreneurs that have a little side thing. It's phenomenal. And then they have a full-time job, or they are looking for a full-time job, but they're really not quite sure when to make that transition. You said you went viral from day one, so I imagine it would be a bit different for you, but tell me a little bit about when this became full-time.
Yeah, that's such a great question, because considering that my job as an optometrist was a very stable one in society's eyes, and a stable like job in my parents' eyes as well, it was a very difficult transition for me. I knew that like with Bubble Tea Club, it was something that really challenged me and pushed me to grow. And it's something that I love doing. I'm someone who just wants to grow in so many different facets of life. And so in terms of like bubble tea, when it started growing more and more, like at that time period, I wasn't even working. So it wasn't something that was like in the forefront, like, hey, I'm going to give up optometry.
And you weren't working because of the COVID, right?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't have a choice. So I just continually worked on bubble tea, and then I think it was after a month since we started bubble tea, that's when I slowly transitioned back into my optom role. But it was only around twice a week. And then I realized that when it got to around, when they wanted me back about 4 days a week, I was like, this is too much. Like I was booked out constantly as well. Everyone wanted their eyes checked after COVID because they needed glasses, and it was all backdated. So it was super, super, super busy. And we ended up in back-to-back patients. And so if I had like 10 minutes to spare, I remember I was like jumping on my phone and then sending out confirmation emails for their tracking numbers. And then this is like hundreds and hundreds of orders as well. So for about like 7 to 8 hours straight, I didn't have a break. I even skipped my lunch to do it's just to make sure that like we were on time, because the business was so demanding. And then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I suppose I actually can't. I had to slowly give it up. And that's when I actually quit my job at my full-time practice. And I picked up something called locuming. So it's kind of like a casual job where you move from one site to another site, and I get to choose when I wanted to work. So my parents at that time were like, what are you doing? Like, I don't want you to, lose your degree. You worked so hard for this. But it was something that I just found myself so passionate about. And like, it's like a completely new world. And I wasn't like, you don't become complacent. And so after a couple of months of locuming, I was doing about 3 to 4 days of locum. And about 4 to 5 days of bubble tea. And now I know that adds up to 8 days, but I actually had like I actually had some shifts in the afternoon. So I was like doing bubble tea until like 3 p.m. and then going straight to my next shift as an optom.
Wow.
And so I didn't have a day off until my actual wedding day. And in the midst of that, I was also like moving houses as well. So it really is like a lot of sacrifice as well. Like the work-life balance is my work-life balance was very appalling, and it's gotten better now.
I'm glad you shared that, because I think we dive into this conversation about wellness often without acknowledging I've rarely met entrepreneurs where the first few weeks or the first few months are slow and steady unless they've got millions of dollars of venture capital. When you're bootstrapping, when you're doing everything from scratch, there will always be a lot of things to do at the beginning, right? And so this idea of be your own boss, choose your own hours, it's a bit of an illusion at the beginning, but it's this fine balance between honoring your wellness. And for you, you made that decision to switch to locoming. That was probably honoring your wellness, right? Not doing both, and then building more time for that. And then eventually, do you feel like where you're at now, you get a bit of balance, or do you feel like it's still pretty hectic?
It's still hectic. Like, I'm definitely working more than the average person, but compared to what it is like at the start, and I think I just want to make sure that everyone does have like this clear perspective of like a startup, that it's super, super hard. That like I remember when we first started, we didn't even know where we were going to ship our boxes out. It was all on the go, and we were just making adjustment on the go. So my partner, who owns a couple of poke stores in Melbourne, we actually ended up shipping like boxes out from that store in the city. So it was pretty much our routine was driving there, getting to work at 9 a.m, pack boxes, and we wouldn't get home until 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we would have like 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then it would be on a repeat. So it was really, really.
Where do you think your ambition comes from? I'm just steering a little bit away from the questions we have planned, but I'm curious, to stay up to 2 in the morning for your bubble tea empire. Where does this ambition come from for you during a pandemic while you've lost your job? I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what you think, where that comes from.
Yeah, I think it was more of like a do or die mindset at that time, considering that I was like, look, if I'm not going back as an optometrist at that time, I may as well try to make something successful. But at that time, I honestly didn't even have the idea that this was going to blow up. It was more so like, I didn't even know if a company who did like as well as we did at the start, was that considered well, or is this considered normal? Was it? And then it was only until like a couple months later where people were like, you actually went viral, like this was like nuts as a startup. And I was like, oh, was it? Is it just normal?
I want to acknowledge, you say you went viral, and I think I want to dive into like the team you have as well, because we spoke about this earlier, because you've got a phenomenal team. Tell us a little about what the roles of different people in your team is. You've talked about, I've just forgotten his name, 15-year-old who built your website. Tell me about the people that have really helped this formally or informally, particularly with, going viral and all these things, because, we can't do these solo, and often founders put a lot of pressure on themselves to do everything by themselves. I think as a founder, you end up doing a lot of things by yourself, a lot more than you think you will. This neat division of tasks is an illusion, but at the same time, having a really solid team that you can divide up the work is essential. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think that's such a good point that you brought up, Daisy, because like the starting team is so, so important. We were really lucky that like my partner, Justin, had already been an entrepreneur, and Daisy, you've met him before as well.
I have, yeah, high school days.
Yeah, he's done restaurants. He's also a founder of something called Gameology, which is the largest board game business in Australia. He's just known, he's always wanted to do business, and I'm being risk adverse. So, and I feel like I've become more risky now that he's my partner. But he's given us some advice. He's too busy to be really a part of like bubble tea to the core. But he's actually helped bring on, like, so Pam actually has started like a business since she was like 16 years old as well. So she has a marketing background, and she has her own marketing company as well for digital agencies. She's worked in like 7-Eleven, so she's amazing at branding, and we were so lucky to have her. We brought on someone who was actually Justin's store manager at Pokade, and so his name is Yi. He started up in operations, the same as me as well. We have no prior knowledge of business, by the way. So we did business together. We did the operations part together, and then as we grew bigger and bigger, my role actually shifted a lot. Mm-hmm. Like finance was just getting completely neglected. So that was then my job to learn all about finance in like two months.
I see you a lot on the marketing, and this is tying into our second question, because your social media, Instagram and TikTok is so engaging. Has that been the main customer acquisition platform for you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So they're so like, we started off by doing memes on Instagram. What was the game called? Animal Crossing. Do you remember that? Like it was going absolutely viral. So everyone was playing Animal Crossing. We started doing memes around that and attracted more attention. And with e-commerce, I think it's really important that you learn how to do performance marketing. So when I was talking about how like roles were shifting, Yi has actually been one of our co-founders who picked up performance marketing, and he's getting really gun at that. So we're really excited.
But has he been, so from the beginning you had Pam to help. Is Pam still doing marketing, or do you do marketing? Because I think marketing is something that a lot of founders struggle with.
Yeah, so Pam does the marketing, but she's more on the branding side. So she's like she's someone who overlooks the entire marketing, making sure that like everything is according to our brand, coming from like our website to our packaging, to like the entire customer experience just needs to be a part of the brand. Everything needs to follow it. And then like Yi with performance marketing. So when I say performance marketing, it's like paid ads for Google and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and yeah. And so Facebook is definitely our highest like revenue stream, and it's one where a lot of companies in e-commerce uses Facebook because it's super amazing. Like it can automatically optimize after maybe 1 or 2 days where the best who your best customers are. So it's incredible.
Just a quick question on that. Did you do organic or paid from the get-go? When did paid kick in?
I think we only put in like $20 at the beginning. So it really wasn't that much at all. I think we did paid advertising a couple of months in. So it wasn't like something that was from the get-go. I think we slowly started to like increase the pay, but when I say like, it was quite negligible to be on $20 like a day for startup.
So how have you find this transitioning? Because I know a lot of people tuned in today are probably current students, you know, still maybe there might be some optometry students. And I know you talked a little bit about this. How have you found it transitioning from like 9 to 5 optometry to this lifestyle of very varied? I've got my best friend's an optometrist, and I was talking to her about you as well and what you're doing, and you know what her job is at OPSM is, you know, it's quite repetitive. It's quite the same thing every day. It's very predictable, 9 to 5, unless the pandemic comes in and then you're off for a few months, you know. But how have you found that transition from that lifestyle to this go lifestyle?
Yeah, such a great question again. Like it's such a huge difference. Like I was from like, you know, medical background, living the 9 to 5 life. And then after that you switch off and you do whatever you want. But now it feels like you're always on the go. Like I find it very difficult to switch off sometimes. Like it's always like there's always something to do to grow. And this actually really does become your baby. You're doing everything that you can in order to make sure that it is growing into like a healthy business. So, and with going into something like e-commerce and never having any background in business at all, I found it to be a complete shift in my terminologies and my complete mindset. And you have to learn about all these different departments. Like you've got your marketing, you've got your operations, your finance, your R&D, and then you've got like your enabling factors, like learning how to read data. Like I didn't even know how to use Excel before this, or use Xero to do finance, and now I'm basically an accountant.
Oh, wow. But you know what, you've displayed a really good example of the importance of learning through doing. Because I mean, a lot of people here, I mean, we're a university, right? We teach degrees, but there is work integrated learning. And the emphasis I always say is like, I did a finance degree, and yet I learned how finance worked when I became I worked at a bank for a bit, and that's when I saw it in action. The thing is, you can learn the theories of things at university, which is somewhat useful, but without that practical experience of you actually diving in and doing it, you don't ever learn properly, I think, how to understand that unless it's just the theoretical knowledge. And the other thing that you've displayed, which I think is phenomenal, is you don't have to wait around to go and get someone to teach you. You just did it. You didn't know how to use Xero. You went online, you worked it out, right? Or you asked a friend, or you asked your co-founders. So I love that you've actually gone and just been like, I don't know how to do this. I'm an optometrist, but it doesn't mean it's out of my depth. You know, it means I can learn it. So I think that really shows your mindset of being curious and like being really adaptable, is that you just jump in and do it. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, completely agree. Like there's so many things that you can learn from my good old friend, Dr. Google, and like outside of school as well. Like lots of my friends in commerce and business school, they say they didn't actually learn too much from uni, but it was, but like that being said, you know, like stay in school, guys.
I always say to people, I'm always very critical of university. I think if you got, when people ask me, should I study a degree? I say, find out who's teaching it, find out what, you know, clubs and societies you can be part of, find out what entrepreneurial programs that university offers. And, you know, when you're at university, I think the degree is just 10%. I think everything else is the environment, the people you're going to meet that you might start companies with, you know, the societies you start. I think all of these, the fact that you get a chance to do international exchange at another university, I think these are all the bigger package of university that people should really think about. So I'm always very open about that. I wanted to just jump to talking about your equity crowdfunding campaign. Tell us, what did you understand about equity crowdfunding? Some people may not know what it is. And how did you manage to be the, you know, #1 for the top expressions of interest for investment on Birchal? Is it Birchal?
Yeah, that's right. So Birchal is Australia's leading crowdsource funding. So we wanted to grow very aggressively, very quickly, and so we had to look for funding in some manner. So we actually talked to like so many different VCs as well, so venture capitalists, and we spent a couple of weeks chatting to them, and then we even got a term sheet as well. And then in the last minute, it was actually Justin who mentioned, it's like, have you heard of crowdsource funding? Why don't we do this? And then we explored the options and weighed up whether it was going to be good for us, because like, you know, you're in the public's eye. Is that like going to be a good thing or a bad thing? A lot of VCs, ironically, were actually saying, nah, like, why would you do crowdsource funding? Because they wanted they wanted to, you know, they wanted our money. They wanted to have our equity as well. So, but we couldn't think of like a better way to thank our community, because we're so community focused, and allowing them to invest in us. It wasn't a better way to thank them for supporting us by allowing them to follow us in our journey as well. So like our group, we call them the bubblers. It's actually grown up to like 5,000 people now, and they're like very active on Facebook. And yeah.
So that's amazing. You got 5,000 people who are like equity holders.
Oh, 5,000 of our bubblers in our Facebook community.
Oh, you mean your Facebook? What about in terms of the equity holders via Birchal?
Yeah, we have like over 1,300. It's enough. It's enough investors.
But that's amazing that those people are financially invested, like they own a piece of your company and therefore they're invested in the success of it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was because of that, we had that branding. Like we collab with like Master Chefs and Typo, and people heard about the brand. Like I think Priscilla was saying that she's actually seen some of our ads as well, which is great. Before we were on crowdsource funding. So because we had a brand to back us up, a lot of people really were willing to help us out. So super grateful for that.
Yeah. I have a question from the audience I might just ask from Andrew Lau. And I think I know from, you've shared a bit of the answer to this, but I'll ask this again. What are your thoughts in terms of competitors, both, you know, up and coming and established? So for instance, like there's lots of brick and mortar bubble tea shops, right? So I guess they can start their DIY kits and they've got everything set up already and they have a large client base. And, you know, copycat products might pop up as well. Did you ever even think about this during your business plan? Did you ever even have a business plan?
No, no business plan. We know now that like business plans just don't go to plan. And
isn't that a quote by the boxer? Like you can, what is it? It's not until you get punched in the face till you realize what it's like when you're going into a game, right?
100%. So I feel like with every business plan, you need to just scale back and have a look at what the problem is. And 9 to 10 times, it's actually really easily resolved as well. But in terms of like competitors at the time, like we didn't have any, and they are definitely like popping up here and there. But what's actually really difficult to replicate is actually the team skill sets and the amount of like motivation that each one has. It's very rare that like you see the founder's face as the image of the company as well. And there's one other company that I see that's actually trying to replicate that. And they're about 1/3 of our size, but in terms of like bigger companies, I think it's also very hard for them to develop this community base as well. So I think in terms of every business, the community and having a loyal following is what makes a company succeed.
Yeah. And also, like, yeah, like you said, the founding team is very hard to replicate. And I think people often underestimate their own ability to do this. I get a lot of founders coming to us, for mentoring, and they're like, oh, I was going to do this, but I saw this other company's already doing it, or, they could do it really easily. But then at the same time, there's lots of examples of, like, people use this example all the time. Why didn't hotels invent Airbnb? Why didn't cabs invent Uber? The reality is, when you're so successful in a certain industry, you kind of forget how you could start something new. The story I love around this is kind of how, the history of kind of salt and then ice and then refrigerators. A while ago, I read about this in the history, and I think I heard it about Singularity University Summit, that people used to dig ice and transport ice, and that was an entire industry, not the drug ice to cool your drinks. And that was an entire industry. And then from that, what happened was eventually someone invented refrigerators. But no one in the ice industry invented refrigerators. They would have had the resources. They were very, very rich at the time, but they didn't. And the reality is, you get a bit of tunnel vision when you're stuck in an industry for so long. So having a fresh, set of eyes for something, as well as the skills and the ambition, that is, I think, way more important than having a perfect business plan, right?
Yeah, we've gotten so many questions about, like, do you have a business plan? I'm like, soz, man, no plan.
You have do you have some, like, financial projections or a business model canvas or something?
Yeah, we definitely had to do one for, like, the crowdsource funding, of course, because if you're going to take people's money, you need to have, like, some sort of plan. But now that we have a bit of a clearer plan, I just know that, like, when we actually go international, there's definitely going to be 10 different 1,000 problems going to hit us all at once, and we just have to solve. Like, as a part of being a business owner, you're just constantly solving all the time. But I think the motivation that you have from, like, the co-founders and the actual skill sets that we have, hopefully that answers your question, is very, very difficult to replicate. So thanks for your question, Andrew.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for founders? And tying it into another question we just got here, I just saw it by Swarna, is, like, so you've talked a little bit about how you found your team members, but how do other people who don't have those close relationships to team members existing or aren't surrounded by entrepreneurs already, how would you suggest they go about finding collaborators and their founding team? This is the second biggest question we get, other than how do I get investment for my company?
How do you get collaborations?
How do you find your co-founders? Like, if you don't come from you're not surrounded by entrepreneurs and you're not surrounded by business people, how do you find your co-founders?
Yeah, great question. I think ours was like serendipity. Like, it just fell together because my partner knew, like, he had the connections as well. Like, but really, 3/5 of us actually have no experience as well. So it's more of like a just do it mindset when you actually have something in mind. Like we were talking about earlier, where you don't need to go and learn business school, just Google everything. Like we also even had like one of our competitors say to us, like, they stole our idea. I had this DIY bubble tea kit idea about like a year ago before they even started, to our supplier, and our supplier told us as well. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but that's just an idea at that time, right? Like Santa Claus isn't going to give you that just because you're on his nice list. But like I feel like if you actually have an idea that you want to execute, I think don't overthink it, just do, and you'll find that like that's actually half the most difficult thing. Like it's kind of like going to the gym. It's really hard to get exercise until you actually get yourself to the gym, and then the rest is a lot easier. And so, yeah.
And I think one thing I'd add in terms of finding founders as well is like surrounding yourself, like what you've mentioned, is people on your team didn't have the skills they learned, but they had the right attitude and they had the work ethic. And I think this is something we can echo after working with thousands of founders. We've had founders with all top degrees and all the skills that on paper would tick for them to build a brilliant business, and they haven't been able to, because they didn't have the same, they didn't have the same level of ambition together, or they weren't clear on their deep purpose for doing business. So I think these values alignment are far more important, and finding people who you have a similar values with and similar goals is a good starting point, rather than being like, oh, I really need a software developer. Oh, I really need a marketer. It's like, well, who do I know who's brilliant? And a lot of those skills they can learn. And often you don't, for businesses like yours, you don't need someone who's like, at the crux of it is not technology, right? There's a lot of no code tools you can stack on top of each other, right?
Yeah, definitely. Connections and like forming relationships is probably one of the most crucial things about business. Like, I think, I can't remember the percentage, it was more than half of businesses fail because of fallouts between co-founders. So yeah, exactly. So like your peers, your mentors, talk to all the strangers that you meet, like, you never know who they're going to be. Like half my business relationships are, if not most, are just based on banter and like genuinely caring about them. And I think that's actually what makes it work.
I find that too, just being really, I think, conversational and treating it like you're treating a new friendship, right? I find people get intimidated and they're going to business meetings for networking and the whole situation is painted as intimidating. But I often ask, how did you meet your first best friend? What was it like? Just talk to people like that. And that way you'll be able to foster kind of genuine collaborations, right?
Yeah, sure.
Another thing I want to ask you, on your tips for founders, but I guess more specific, is you have this real attitude of like high intention and low attachment. I saw this with the puzzles. I see this with this. Like if bubble tea were completely tomorrow to not work out, or another business idea you've had doesn't work out, how do you deal with the, because on one way it's like your baby, it's a business you have, and another way you're like, I'm not too attached to it. How do you have that attitude?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like and that's how we actually turn things around so quickly internally as well. I think if you try not to get attached to anything, and I know it's very difficult, the more time that you actually spend on it, the more attached you get to an idea. But when you actually realize like maybe there's a better idea out there, like it doesn't need to be like a whole completely different business, but it could be a different solution. You just need to run towards that new idea, because like, for example, like a classic example is like when we talked to all these VCs for several weeks, we were getting attached. We were almost about to sign that term sheet. And then it was only when CSF was actually recommended, but like we talked to strategy consultants, and we realized like, okay, this actually sounds so much better for your business. Run from plan A to run B. And the same things with paper straws that you actually saw in the beginning of the video. It was like we had plastic straws and we got shit for it. And so we were just like, okay, next day we actually brought in paper straws straight away. And it was like an internal turnaround so quickly. So it was just a mindset of like, whatever you think like will do better, you just go and you just do.
Yeah. So I think at the core of it is that you're just really ready to adapt and listen to your customers. And that's, again, someone has asked about competitive advantage, and I'd say that is one of your competitive advantages. As a nimble, small team, you can immediately respond to what customers like. You don't need to get approvals and processes. You don't need to look at supply chains and all of the structure that's there. I think the very same things that make big companies big are the same things that hold them back. So as a small founding team, how do you intend to keep, as you scale and grow, how do you balance this growth with staying nimble?
Oh, it's so hard. Like again, in the video, you saw like we listened to every customer, we read every reply. Now, nah, that doesn't happen. I mean, like we, of course, like now we have like someone else doing it as well. And they'll kind of summarize for us like, hey, this is like the top complaints that we have. How can we actually fix it? So it's become more of that. And it's like our Facebook group started from like 2 people to now over 5,000 people. It's like there's no way that we can just read all those comments. And as you grow even bigger, you also need to do a lot more investment as well. So if you're thinking about an e-commerce store, there's a lot of money that goes straight into stock, because you rather overstock than understock and sell out. Because once you sell out, your competitors who are looking for DIY products or any other product, they will go to your competitors because they want things here and now. So that's a bit of advice. So many campaigns.
Yeah, we've got another question from Abigail. Thanks for answering that one. Is how much capital did you have starting up? I like this because I get asked this all the time. When I ask people why they haven't started on their ideas, they say I have no capital. And it's because I think everyone thinks you need a lot of capital, but I'm curious to know, how much capital did you have starting up?
Yeah, that's so there's that misconception that you need a lot of money to start up something. We really didn't. I think I probably spent about $1,000 or so, and Pam probably spent $1,000 or so, but after launching, it was pretty much positive cash flow at that time. And I know that we are in a unique position to be in a positive cash flow for a startup business, but you really don't overthink it and have like a whole plan set out and be like, I need to buy this and I need to buy that and then launch it. We actually launched it without having any product. So we tried the product at that time, but we didn't realize that it was going to blow up at that time. So we just wanted to test the idea, and we're like, yay, people are actually buying. And then and like, you know, we're celebrating that people are actually loving this idea. And then on the other hand, like in 2 seconds, I'm like, oh shit, I don't have any packaging. I don't know where I'm going to actually send out the product.
That's so interesting, because people often think when we work with a lot of founders, and we try to teach this at Spark Deakin, is that you can launch a product without the product existing and then service it later once you've got customers, as opposed to the opposite, which is people spend a year or 6 months perfecting a product, and then they go, oh, how do I find customers? And the reality is, you only, like, there are some exceptions, I'll be honest, where you need to spend years perfecting the product, and this is probably folks with a PhD who are looking at you know, deep innovation and inventing intellectual property. That's not just a trademark or a brand. But then there's businesses like yours that are phenomenal and can grow to, you know, the customers that you've grown to and to the revenue you've grown to. And it's not like a new invention per se. It's new insofar as how you deliver it, how you're nimble, how your brand is so phenomenal and connects with people. I just love the post today about with Drake's new album, how you guys are you really respond to trends. So you're really with it. So I think you can still be nimble and do these things. And that you don't have to have a product. What you've emphasized, you don't have to have a product before you launch. You can have a design of a product before you launch. And another example I'll share there is, you know, there's a massage startup called Soothe. And I remember when they were launching in Australia, they had already put ads as if they exist here. And I went in and I booked a mobile massage a couple of years ago to come home. I booked it, I put my credit cards in, I paid for it. And then I waited, and 2 minutes later, I got a message saying, hey, we don't actually have any therapists there, but here's $20 off for your next time. And it was interesting. And then I found out they actually use that data to decide which cities to expand in before arriving in the country. And it's interesting. It's like, oh, you kind of sold me something that you can't offer, but I'm actually not so upset because you've now given me a $20 voucher for when you do this, right? I don't know, that's interesting, but I think that idea of, like, you know, offering your customers something and just seeing if they're interested before spending months or years working on a product is really key to entrepreneurship these days.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got a couple more questions. Sarah would like to know what complaints or customer issues you face mostly at the moment around, is it quality, delivery, or availability?
Yeah, it's definitely not quality. We actually try to source the best ingredients around the world. So we've tried, like, for example, like 10 different brown sugars, and it ranges from like tasting from floral to molasses to freaking soy sauce. So quality is definitely there. Convenience depends. Like, if you're going to, like, I think overseas shipment would probably be our biggest complaint. So initially, one of the things that we were talking about is, like, we want to be able to hit the market first and be able to get, because that's actually really important. But then at the same time, it's like, it's $50 shipping all the way to the US. It's like, people are not willing to pay that. And especially when you have competitors like Amazon, who in the US are very spoiled for choice as well. They're not willing to pay like $50 for that. So that's probably one of our biggest complaints. So we decided, like, look, let's just hold off and wait for international expansion until we can get the product on the ground. So that's where we wanted to do 3PL, which is like a third-party logistics, to actually do our fulfillment. So we're going to, that would be our biggest complaint, is shipping time. And that's because the US is, you can get your delivery the next day, whereas like shipping from Australia, you're not going to get it for like 2 weeks, especially during COVID as well.
Yeah. So at the moment, your shipping turnaround time in Australia in Melbourne is what?
In Australia, you can get it into like 3 days.
Okay, 3 days. But Americans have higher expectations because of Amazon.
Oh my God, they do. Like,
they want it straight away, same day often.
Yeah, I was talking to the CEO of Sketch and Etch. I don't know if you've heard of them, but like they're neon signs, and he actually started his international expansion as well. They're absolutely amazing. And he was saying like the US is just so spoiled. Like if you don't respond within 1 hour, they will go onto different platforms and write you bad reviews. So it's a very different mindset compared to like Australian customers as well. So knowing your demographic, your customers is super important.
We got another question from Rosie. I quite like this question as someone who's very interested in ethical supply chains as well. She said, it's my understanding that a transparent supply chain is super important for being an ethical business, knowing that people are paid properly, the environmental impacts. Do you have a criteria about who you would work with? And how do you assess your business partners in Taiwan?
Yeah, such a great question. We are trying to look towards to getting our business more towards like that environmentally friendly kind of aspect. It's very difficult at this stage. Like people don't really understand that like we can't just use paper bags for our powders because it doesn't hold the quality that you would like. So all our advisors recommended against that. But where we can be environmentally friendly, that's something that we definitely choose down that route. And as science gets better around that aspect, we will continually evolve with them as well. So in terms of like assessing like your business partners in Taiwan, I think it's important because like Taiwan, China, like a lot of Asian countries, even if you have exclusivity with these guys, it's not necessarily they'll abide with the contracts. So you want to be careful and also have like a secondary supplier as well who does maintain your quality. So having like that also helps with like your negotiating power. So by having different type, like for example, we have our cups, but then we also have like a different cup supplier as well. So in case anything goes like south, then we also have another supplier to back us up.
I think one of the things that Rosie was getting at here is like, how do you make sure the people making like all supply chains are ethical? Like, how do you make sure the people making the cups all are paid in those factories? Because, you know, your bubble tea would have a lot of ingredients. So how do you track down different areas of that kind of supply chain and just make sure it's all ethical?
Yeah, so we try to make it reusable as we can, but it is a very difficult criteria actually, because the science isn't just there yet. But we will just have to wait until we can get there. But no company actually does that at this stage, especially when we are the first DIY concept as well. Like normally they are only selling their products to brick and mortar stores. So they're buying it in bulk. They're buying it in 3 kilos or 5 kilo bottles, which is nuts. But we can't sell it to our customers in that kind of size. So we've actually developed our own IP and to make sure that we are protected as well, so that we have our own bottles and these small sizes to bring out. But again, like in terms of like being an ethical business, it's something we're looking towards, but we haven't hacked yet.
Okay, gotcha. And it's really hard, actually. I've got to acknowledge at the beginning of a business to do all of these things. We're really big at Spark Deakin on ethical business, but I also acknowledge at the beginning when you're just trying to get started to see if an idea is going to work, it's really hard. And then as you grow, you start to work on your supply chains. Often when we order merch and things at Spark Deakin, we will try our best to find ethical suppliers, but sometimes we have to ask a lot of questions, and then the cost gets exorbitant as well. And it's like, well, we have this merch and it's $100 per piece, should we just not have any merch? Or should we not have t-shirts if we're going to give out these t-shirts if they're that expensive? But it gets tricky. But I think the world is moving towards where more customers will start to demand supply chains that are ethical and things like that. So it's great to hear that you guys are looking at that and working on that, particularly around the environmental side as well. We have another question from Sarah, which is, and from Charit actually. So we'll start with the one from Charit, which is, how did you identify your suppliers? Like you being here, how did you find the suppliers for your bubble tea?
Yeah, so Alibaba. Alibaba is a good source to go through. So we caught up a couple of different factories as well. And we're also lucky that, so I'm not Chinese, but so Tim at 15 years old, he was learning how to speak more Chinese, and he's gotten so much better at like Mandarin as well. He was actually the one calling up different suppliers that he saw online. And then he's the one who actually developed our new product as well. So he's an absolute gun at so young of age. So yeah, he was actually
how do you know remind me how you know Tim again? 15-year-old Tim learning Chinese, calling up suppliers who made your website. Who is Tim?
Oh, Tim. So he's actually one of the co-founders. He's Justin's little brother.
Okay.
So at 15, like he was just brought on because like he's a very motivated 15-year-old.
I can see that. He said he's learning Chinese.
Oh my God, yeah, he's helped streamline our customer service. He learnt coding on the job and then built the website. He like successfully applied for our trademarks, and he's like a key player in our product development, like all whilst like juggling high school at the moment. He's 17 now and he's in VCE, and he's just absolutely gone.
Wow.
If he can do it, no one has any excuse.
I need to talk to Tim as well. Gee, that's phenomenal. I guess that's just another, that your age doesn't matter, your experience doesn't matter. It's that attitude of being curious and like learning on the go. I'm sure Tim's not like a child genius. He's learned this. It's his attitude, right, towards these things. Like, I'll get my hands dirty, I'll learn, and we'll make it happen, right?
Yeah, for sure. Justin definitely plays an impact on him, considering he's got like a couple of businesses.
Of course. I think having people, members of your family, or being surrounded by people in entrepreneurship is very important. Because I know I didn't have any family members who had explored business at all. So the first time I started exploring entrepreneurship, my mom was like, "You're doing a law degree. Why would you do that? Stop it. It's not secure income," or and it can be tricky. But if you've got people around you that do business, you start to think differently. And this is one of the things I've learned from talking to entrepreneurs like yourself, interviewing you, and also having friends who are entrepreneurs, is just a difference in mindset entirely. The kind of hustle mentality, the greater appetite for risk, the less attachment. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I met are not at all attached to money. And this came as a surprise to me when I was a very left-wing, tree-hugging hippie who was like, business is everything that's wrong with the world. That was me. But I learned that by talking to these people, is like, oh, they're just really, really interested in solving problems. They're very ambitious. They like the fact that wealth buys them freedom, like it's more about freedom and choice, rather than I would like to acquire, have a lot of money. And one of the entrepreneurs I was speaking to last week was just saying to me that doesn't care if he lost everything overnight, because he could just make it again, because he knows how to do this now. And he came here as an international student who worked at McDonald's and now makes around $100,000 profit a week. And I was like, and barely speaks English, mind you, barely speaks English, runs a business here. And I'm like, wow. So I think, people pay too much attention to some of these other things when you can really do this based on your attitude, which I think you've really displayed, and Tim has.
Yeah, definitely. Like my parents came from, like my dad came to Australia on a boat at like 21 years old, didn't know how to speak English. So I felt like it was something he's instilled in me to work hard. And I think that that's something like we take for granted, is like the Australia, like my uncle always tells me that Australia is such an amazing country. Like we had COVID and they're paying us money for staying at home. Like it's nuts. So yeah, we live in such like an amazing country, and we just should never take that for granted, and just don't forget to work hard.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's all the questions I had. Let me just have a quick look. Asya and Priscilla, were there any more that I missed from the chat?
I think there was one from Sharif, really curious about what that first 4 days looked like.
Yeah.
Can you tell us can you take us on a whirlwind tour of those first 4 days? Yeah,
definitely. So Pam was filming product shots in her living room. So me and Justin went to buy the ingredients, and I was sourcing packaging in those 4 days, because we're like, oh crap, it's already it's about to launch and we don't have any packaging at all. So I just looked up different companies who actually did packaging, and then we tried the I created the recipe as well. We try to make it as nice as we can, and then taste tested it amongst the group. And then so Yi was helping Tim create the website because he does have a background in tech as well. And Justin was just giving advice on the side. So that was pretty much it. It was definitely a lot more jam-packed than like how I made it sound, but it was everyone was doing their own thing to set up the website at that time and create content for it, create a logo for that, and then launch that straight up on the web.
Thanks for sharing. One last question I realized I didn't ask as well was, we've gone through some of these tips, but do you have any other tips for founders that you wish you knew before? Maybe based on expectations versus reality.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest tip would be to work your resources. So making those connections that I was talking about is so crucial because you never know who they're going to be when they grow up. So if you have any questions at all, just ask all your mentors like what you need to know. And like if you, I actually get so many LinkedIn messages as well, people asking me like, you know, how did you start? And like they're interested in starting their own thing. Like, what should I do? Like, and for example, we went through virtual and we had so many people asking us like, how was the virtual experience? So, and I think that's a very good starter, and that's what we do for our mentors as well. So for international expansion, I'm like constantly looking for a mentor who can take us there. So if you know anyone, let me know, hit me up. But yeah, it's just constantly asking, working your resources is all about the people that you know. That's
and how do you want to share a little bit about relationships? Like, how do you approach new relationships? Because I think there's two things. I imagine now you get a lot of DMs from a lot of people, right? So how do you decide who you're going to respond to based on what stands out? What do you look for? And then on the other front, you're doing a lot of outreach, looking for mentors for expansion, looking for experts in certain areas. How do you build that relationship?
Yeah, that's such a good one because like I get hundreds and hundreds of emails and hundreds of like DMs as well, and I think I filter them by like what the business also needs as well. Like sometimes like I'm just someone who loves to teach someone as well, so if they're like a student and they're willing to learn and I can tell that like they're so keen on actually learning from someone, I'm happy to give out a helping hand in that aspect. But because like, you know, when you have this huge influx, you can't respond to every single person. So for those who are outreaching to me in terms of like pitching their like ideas and their business to potentially be on board with Bubble Tea Club, it's really what the business needs. Like if we need someone in marketing, we'll hire someone in marketing. Like where, you know, we needed someone in operations, it's like, okay, let's have a look at this. Or we needed to optimize processes. It's like, okay, maybe let's talk to a consultant. So it's whatever your business needs. And that's how you pick who you really want, but also make sure that you get good reviews on those people or those businesses as well, and make a very informed decision.
So before just agreeing to partner with them, make sure you've asked other people about working with them or looking at reviews, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like there's actually a mentor at the moment who he owns the second largest skincare brand in the US, which is awesome. And he loves bubble tea and he actually reached out to us. But also being a very good entrepreneur versus being a good teacher is completely different. Yeah. So what I've done is like, even though he has such a high caliber, I'm trying to find out who he's actually mentored and ask them like, you know, how is he as a mentor? And I think that's really important as well.
That is huge. It kind of goes back to what I said about if you're going to study at a university, find out who's teaching you, who are your teachers, right? But yeah, I love that you do that because we've noticed this at Spark Deakin. We have many different mentors. And it took us a while, a couple of years in as we organized, you know, people can email, everyone attending today can email us to organize a mentoring session with a mentor. What we've realized is there's like a different types of mentors. There's mentors that are complete experts at what they do and they're phenomenal entrepreneurs, but but they're not always, not all of them, but a lot of them aren't actually good at teaching you. And there's a psychology and a science behind this that I'll just share. And then there's the other group of mentors who are mainly consultants who've worked with a lot of different businesses. And usually these guys are brilliant at teaching as well. And, you know, then there's a group, not on our team, but there's people who claim to be mentors who really aren't good at anything, but they're not here. I should mention that too. I think, you know, with the growing industry of entrepreneurship, there's lots of different types of people you'll find. Now, the thing I wanted to mention about the psychology behind why brilliant people like the person in the US, he might be a great mentor, he might not, is I read about this through Teachable, which is another startup, which is when you, Teachable is an online platform where anyone attending today can go on and teach a course, right? But when you have learned a skill, recently, they found the highest earning teachers on Teachable are people who have just learned a skill teaching it. Why? They looked at this. Well, they said, if you're an expert with 50 years of expertise in what you do and you're brilliant at it, often you have forgotten the things that make it hard for beginners. So you were like, yeah, just do this. Like, yeah, just do this, just do that. So often when I teach people how to build relationships, even I'd forgotten, I just said, yeah, just DM 50 people on LinkedIn. And I forgot how daunting and scary it is to even message one person if you've never messaged anyone, because I've messaged 500 now. But this is the thing, is that people, when they teach you something, often they forget how to, the emotional element of being a beginner. They might give you perfect tips, perfect everything to do, but then they forget the other emotional side, as well as like the barriers you're going to have as a newbie. And that's kind of the psychology behind it.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. That's all the questions. I think we might, there's one more from Abigail. The second part of her question that I forgot to ask that's just come to me is, she asked around, when do you start paying yourself? And this is a lot of early founders who are really struggling, you know, especially I wanted to speak to our international students, you know, to people who've moved out of home and have to, you know, cover their own rent and things like that. When do you decide that you're allowed to draw money from your business? And how do you have that conversation with your founders, or how do you decide that?
Yeah, it's just if your cash flow is good, is a very simple answer. So it really depends on what your business needs, and like whether you're a SaaS business or whether you're an e-commerce business, like that budget can be like that buffer that you have as a backup in your bank account may be very, very different. Like you may want to keep like a 3-month buffer for your business after, like, for example, if you had like all these fixed costs, then how much buffer do you want to have on that? So for example, it might be like 3 months or 6 months, depending on what your business requires. And that's actually how we determine whether we get paid or not. So if anything goes south in our business, we are the first ones to take a pay cut. Like all our staff will definitely get paid, like all the fixed costs, like you need to pay that. So it's like, so the very simple answer is actually having a look at your cash flow forecast. If you get an accountant to do that, to help you out, that would definitely be helpful. But just work out, like, you know, what's your rent, like what are your transaction fees, like who do you have to pay, like how much is that in total, and then multiply it by like the amount of months that you want to keep as a buffer. And then if you have enough cash for that, pay yourself.
And what's your buffer at your company?
We do 6 months.
6 months. So you've always got 6 months of cash for everyone before you, yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's really helpful actually to know as well, especially as businesses start to grow.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's also more important as like you are growing as a business as well as a startup, because like you're constantly needing a lot of money to grow. So for example, if you have like a spurt in growth because your marketing was bomb, then you just need extra cash, and like it's so good to have this buffer just in case.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Look, was there any other questions, Astrid or Priscilla, I missed? I think we got like a couple minutes left.
I think it's pretty
we covered
much
a lot. I'm keen to know what's next. What's bubble tea for the next next iteration? Next 6 months, 12 months is probably too far away. What about 3 to 6 months? What about by the end of 2021? What's in store?
We've done a soft launch to the US at this stage, and we can definitely see that there's a demand through just looking through our like performance marketing. We can see like there's a higher click-through rate through our ads in the US. So we want to expand over there, and that's why we did the crowdsource money in the first place. It definitely takes a lot of time in order to get that ready. So in the next 3 to 6 months, hopefully we would have products on the ground in the US and ready to launch. So that'll be super, super exciting. But when one of our mentors said we wanted to expand to the UK, you know, the US, Canada, New Zealand, and all these different countries, but I think it's very we needed to also focus as well, because our team loves growing aggressively. Sometimes you just need to scale back and just think like, what do you actually need to focus on? And right now it's actually the US, and just don't think about any other countries. Like, just look at the US, and if you can dominate that market, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of sales, you know. Yeah.
We have one last question, which we have some time for, that's popped in here from Rosie. She said, it was interesting to hear you talk at the start about you and your parents expecting you'd stay as an optom to make the most of your degree. I think this is a pressure that a lot of us with the Asian parents feel. How did you go navigating this conversation with your parents? And what's your advice on how to break it down to our parents? How to break it to our parents we're not living up to their expectations?
Yeah, definitely. I think they wanted me to at least keep my registration. Like, at that time they were like, no, don't you dare lose your optometry degree. And like but for me, I tried to show them how hard I was working on this project. And I think it wasn't until we had some press was when like my mom's like, oh my God, my daughter's on channel 7 and channel 10 and and on, like, you know, the Herald Sun, like, look at, yeah. So I think it was until then, like that I know it's a very difficult conversation to have at that time, and we were lucky to have that PR as well. So that was when my mom realized, like, okay, like, you guys are, you know, you're smashing it, and like, you're working so hard on this. And every time she would call me, I'm like, what did you do today? And I'm just like, I'm still working. It's 9 a.m., like 9 p.m. and she'd call up. I'm like, I just had dinner and I'm working again. So it was, she could see how tough it was. Like, but even now, like, there's this like mindset that's like, still keep your registration just in case. And I think she's right in that regards as well.
I guess it's security and safety. You mentioned your dad and you're on a boat, right? Like, they were looking for security and safety and stability. And I guess our generation's looking for a bit more like adventure and purpose and experiences, right? And that's the difference. I guess they made sacrifices so we could do these things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. We have 5 minutes, and I have one last question that's come up in my mind that I want to ask, and then we've got the giveaway that I want Priscilla to talk about. Is you're the face of the brand as well. You know, your team is very visible. What went into this decision to decide that you guys would be visible faces, and that this just wouldn't be a brand like without your faces?
So Pam is like, she loves marketing. She's been doing this for so long, and she was like, let's just be the brand. And to be like, at that time I was very shy. Like, I hated like the camera. I hated speaking in front of people. So that video that you saw, that was actually our very first video, and I haven't seen that in so long. I was just awkward. I was like, hi, I'm Jenny, and you know, so it was a very different it was very different for me to have my face on something. And I think the first few like Instagram stories that I made, I was like, I was actually being very honest and real about like how I felt about like being in front of a camera. I'm like, I normally don't do this, but I think it's very important to celebrate our milestone. And we hit like 2,000 followers on Instagram, such humble days. Yeah. So I think it was more about like, also, to be honest as well, females being the face of a brand generally is something that does better, just FYI.
It's really interesting. Yet it's interesting, most media coverage goes to men.
I know.
Yeah, most of the media coverage in Australia goes to men, yet females do better, which is, you know, Boost Juice as well. There are a lot of brands that are led by women, but the media coverage in Australia particularly goes to women, or goes to men, sorry. Look, this has been fantastic. I'm just going to hand over to Priscilla to talk about the giveaway, but I have loved this conversation. You've really kept it real, on brand. We've had a good laugh, and I think we've learned a lot. And I think for the people attending, you know, there's some key lessons there that you know, you've just got to get started, and you got to make mistakes along the way, and have, you know, high intention, low attachment, and find a really good team to do things with. Priscilla, would you like to talk a little bit about our giveaway?
Right. So yeah, as promised, we'll be giving out 5 gift vouchers, but at the moment we can't really just call the people out because there are people that left midway and whatnot. But those who won will be contacted through email with their prizes in the next few days. I will try to make it tomorrow.
So we've just remind me, we've randomly picked 5. We picked 5 that asked questions.
So, oh, my computer just froze. So it would be everyone gets 1 entry for just attending.
Okay.
And then those who ask question gets additional entry in the raffle, as well as if they bring a friend, which I've sent out like emails beforehand to bring their friends. And if they have, like, they would get like an extra entry.
I'm gonna add another one just now because we've got 21 people here left with us. We'll give another one out to someone who tweets or writes about this event on a public Instagram about what you learned from Jenny today with hashtag. Jenny, what hashtag should they have? Come on the spot. Have you got a hashtag suggestion?
Spark Bubbler.
Okay, Spark Bubbler.
Oh.
I'll put it out. Hashtag Spark Bubbler.
Spark Bubbler. So just share what you learned from Jenny today. You can share it on LinkedIn. You can share it on Instagram, or we're less active on Twitter, and we are actually less active on Facebook. But you can share on those. Share on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't do Twitter. We're not that active on there. So those 3, we'll give out another voucher. We'll go through that by closing date probably, and close the business tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yep. Right. Also, just saying, you know, Jenny's been a legend just being here and like talking about all that she's learned and stuff. But she's also a legend for giving everyone tuning in today a 5% discount for your purchases at bubbleteaclub.com.au with the code DeakinSpark5. And that's for everyone here. And this is available until the 31st of October.
Awesome. And you'll just pop that in the chat or the wrap up email as well, right? All right.
I will be.
Awesome.
I'll just put it here now.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I have one last suggestion just before we go. Could you please release a range with pandan bubble tea? Because I really I love pandan so much. Like, I exited the Monash Freeway to get pandan. I've been dreaming about pandan since I got back from Thailand, and only one store sold it for limited edition, and then they stopped. So pandan.
Well, we did just get some samples in. But it doesn't, releasing things are very, again, like so much, it's a logistical nightmare, like having like so many different
I know, Jenny, but I'll exit the M1, I'll exit the M1 freeway. I'll come pick it up from your supplier. I will order one every month for you.
At least it will guarantee that you will have one this time compared to char time.
Yeah. Last time I went in, guys, for those of you tuning in, I took an exit off a freeway, and then I looked 30 minutes for Chadstone parking, and I went all the way in there, and I was like, pandan bubble tea, and they said, we don't sell it at this store. And I was like, okay.
Tragic story.
Do you want any other one? No, just pandan. All right, Jenny, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thanks to our awesome team, Priscilla and Asya and Sehar, who have been behind helping the logistics of this event and organizing and communicating this with you guys. This has been phenomenal, and we will all stay in touch.
Thanks for listening to me ramble, guys.
So great, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later. Bye.
Rambling.